Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, I think we've got a really important show today. I mean, it comes in two areas for you, loss of a sibling, and also you work with TAPS, the Tragedy Assistance Program for the military, and see a lot of families who've lost siblings. So you've got a person who's written a book about it, done research, and actually walked the walk. So Heidi, would you like to introduce her today?
Annie Sklaver Orenstein. Annie's brother Ben died in 2009 during military service in Afghanistan. Annie is a researcher, oral historian, and a storyteller, and she's the author of the book, Always a Sibling, The Forgotten Mourner's Guide to Grief. Welcome to our podcast, Annie.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you on today. And as I told you before we started the show, we really a big reach for us is adults losing family members and siblings and that kind of thing, because even today there isn't a lot of support for that.
Yeah. There isn't. You're right. And I'm happy to provide it however I can, in all the outlets possible.
Tell us a bit about your brother.
Yeah, so I am the youngest of three, and my older brothers were just my life, my idols, my guiding stars. We're all 4 years apart. And my eldest brother, Ben, who's so 8 years older than me, um, joined the military in 1999. He had political aspirations and he was very into humanitarian aid, and he felt like the military was this untapped vehicle to provide humanitarian aid. He joined in 2000 and he finished boot camp about 2 weeks before 9/11, and then everything changed. Um, and he had his first deployment. He was in the reserves, but he had his first deployment in 2006 to the Horn of Africa. And he, while there, founded a nonprofit to continue the work they were doing, building wells in Uganda. And then in 2009, he was called up on a stop loss order for his second deployment and deployed to Afghanistan. And it was about 3 months into that deployment that he was killed by a suicide bomber. They thought they were going to meet a local village leader. He was on a civilian affairs team, and it was an ambush. He was the captain of the unit, and he was killed along with one other soldier in the unit and their translator.
Wow, what a shame.
Horrible.
It was 3 weeks before his 33rd birthday. So he was 32. I was 25. He was engaged. I had a boyfriend who I eventually did marry. So I actually love that my husband did meet my brother and know him and knew me in the before times.
Your nuclear family was still kind of connected.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
And you were really young to not have a brother die. I mean, I was 20. We were in our 20s. It's like you don't expect for your brother to die in your 20s. After his death, you didn't find any resources. You didn't find a lot of resources. You didn't find a lot of places where you could get support.
Right. I saw a lot of people reaching out to my parents, obviously. My brother's fiance at the time, there were military widow organizations reaching out to her. And I remember even asking her, like, is there a sibling version of this? And the answer was kind of like, you could start one. It would be really helpful to have one. And I'm like, who am I to start one? I can't even get out of bed in the morning. And one of the things that I write about in the book was I went to Barnes and Noble in Union Square, which is like 5 stories, and I thought I'll find a book. This was kind of pre heavy internet shopping days. And, so also hard to find like online communities, or at least I didn't know how. So I went to a big bookstore and I looked through the grief section, and, it got to the point where I was looking in the index and the table of contents just for the word sibling or sister or brother or anything. And I left empty-handed, and I felt like, I guess I'm supposed to be fine. Socially, everyone is treating me like I should be fine, or I should be taking care of my parents, that, I don't really have any needs. Um, there are no books about this. Like, I kind of thought that I was losing my mind, and that I guess I'm supposed to be fine, when my brother is murdered, which obviously I now understand is not the case. But when you're 25,
Right.
you don't know.
Mhm. Absolutely. I was wondering, were you living by your parents? Did you have to go in and give them a lot of support?
Brother Sam and I both lived in New York City, and my parents are in Connecticut. So we were about 2 hours away. Um, my parents were very, and I didn't realize this at the time. I realized that I had a lot more perspective on this when I was interviewing for the book, but my parents did not ask much of us at all. They did not put their grief on us. They did not ask us for anything. I think we all spent a few years really lying to each other about how we were doing because no one wanted to put a burden on anyone else. And so, I would still go home on weekends sometimes, often because I needed it, but rarely because they asked me to. But you don't really have to ask, you kind of just know anyway.
I found when Scott died that it wasn't my parents that were putting any pressure on me, but society was
Yes.
whispering things in my ear like, oh my gosh, how, be strong for your parents. And the worst loss that can ever happen is the loss of a child. And so initially I thought, well, maybe I don't even have a right to my grief because look what my parents have gone through.
It's all well intentioned,
Mhm.
but and what I found was no one would ask me how I was doing. They would ask me how my parents were doing. And then maybe they would ask how Ben's fiance was doing. But no one ever asked how I was doing. And that, when you hear that over and over again and again, you start to internalize that.
Right.
And, for the book, I conducted a lot of in depth interviews with grieving siblings.
How
Yes,
many years after your brother died did you start writing this book and interviewing people?
close to 10 years.
Okay, which is normal. So you kind
Close
of
to 10
were for
years.
10 years, you were kind of just figuring out your identity, I'm guessing, and figuring out your life. That I hear that over and over and over from siblings.
Hmm. Hmm.
That they've kind of just were putting things on a shelf for 10 years or trying to figure out
Yes.
who they were now without their siblings for 10 years.
I didn't have the vocabulary at the time, but was experiencing a lot of complicated grief. And that really, I was stuck. I was very much stuck in my grief, and I was clinging to it for dear life because I felt like it was all I had left of him. And so I should hold on to it. And I didn't understand that that relationship could change, that I could have a more positive relationship with him after death. That took me close to 10 years. And it was as we were approaching the 10-year anniversary that I started wanting to explore more. And it actually started with me doing interviews with some of Ben's friends about him because I was afraid they were going to start forgetting things. And I was 8 years younger. So there was a lot I didn't know. And it started with that, and then it snowballed into really exploring sibling loss overall.
Have you ever wanted to go to Afghanistan? I mean, do you think you're going to want to go there or?
That is an excellent question that no one has ever asked me. 16 years, and I don't know, dozens and dozens of podcast interviews and all of that. No one has ever asked me that, and I have never thought of it. My initial gut reaction is no, no interest. Um, but one thing I've learned from grief is that that changes, as we enter different parts of our life. there are different things that we want to explore or understand. So maybe one day. I always had a very complicated relationship with the military because Ben was in the reserves. It was not his identity, he was much more connected to the things he did in his civilian life. And then the reserves was, the thing he was supposed to do one weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. And so for a very long time, I felt like the military killed him. It was not
Mhm.
how he lived, it was how he died.
Mhm.
And that was really a difficult thing to kind of grapple with and understand. Um, and I think I don't know that I need that kind of physical closure of being there, but I also would not be surprised if that changes. And in 10 more years, I'm booking a ticket.
I was just thinking a show we did recently with a man whose wife was killed in Africa by an elephant in Uganda, and he went back and did a full circle, wrote a book, and then has
Wow.
gone full back to where she was killed and talking to the guide and going there.
Yeah.
I was just
I
thinking,
will say where he was in Africa, he had a staff there for his nonprofit, and there were some folks we kept in touch with, and I know that now there's, like, a high school named after him there, and there are a few
Wow.
things named after him. I'm much more interested in going there because I
uh,
know that was a place he really loved.
I love it. Well, I want to circle back and ask you about the things coming in. I know you talk a little bit about his possessions, his personal items that came in the military shipped in and you went through it. Could you talk a little bit about that?
He had been living in Atlanta and his fiancée was in New York, and the plan was to kind of move in with her once he was back. And so but he had sold his place in Atlanta, and so he almost it was strange because he had stuff in his childhood bedroom at my parents' house. There was a storage unit full of his stuff, and then there were a few things at his fiance's place. And the military, when they returned his stuff, I think they returned most of it to his fiance's house because that was kind of the address on record. Um, and it was honestly really hard and strange to have to hear it from someone else. Like, someone else got his stuff and went through
Mhm.
it and then would, like, call and tell us about it, and that felt really strange to me. Um, Whereas going through the stuff, that was in my parents' room felt more, like, natural because that was his room. Um, the storage unit, I think in many ways was, a blessing in disguise because we could go through it when we wanted to. I think my parents kept that unit for about a year, and then when Sam and I came back and we went through the unit together as a family. And I've had friends since then who have lost siblings, and it's often like, well, now, we need to clean out their room because they live with a roommate somewhere, and, we need to clean it out within the week or something. And that going through their possessions under that time crunch feels like it would be very difficult. Where I think we had some things that were returned immediately, and then other things that we could go through more at our own speed. But it was strange that it wasn't being returned to my parents, or being
Mhm.
returned to one of us.
Mhm.
Well, especially because you've known him for 25 years and he's been
Mhm.
such an important part of your life. And as you know, most siblings will spend 80 to 100% of their lifetimes with each other. This is one of the most significant relationships ever, which
Yes.
is why it's so mind boggling that it's minimized and unacknowledged, right? Um,
Mhm.
it doesn't make sense. I'm wondering
It
if you had talked,
doesn't.
did you interview anyone that was in his unit also? Were any of those
I
the
did.
friends? You
I
did.
did. I
Okay.
did. Um, some wanted to talk to me, some said they wanted to talk to me and then ghosted me, and some never responded in the first place. And I fully understand all 3 of those reactions, like, that no
Yeah.
hard feelings at all. Um, but it was really, I learned a lot, I heard a lot. There was a lot that he didn't tell us. Um,
Mhm.
because he didn't want to freak us out, understandably,
Right.
and it was helpful to kind of understand what was really going on. And I think it was helpful for them actually after I spoke to two of them on the phone. One of them still had something of my brother's, and another one of them made this beautiful handmade wood and resin box that they were able to put these tags in. And they drove from South Carolina up to Connecticut to my parents' house so that they could hand deliver this, and at that
Wow.
point, it was probably 11 years after Ben had died, but they had been afraid to approach us. They didn't want to trigger anything. They had horrible survivor's guilt. They were
Mm.
afraid that we would hate them that because they came home and Ben didn't. And so I didn't realize it, but reaching out to them really built a bridge that then, they came to visit us and visit my parents. And it was a really beautiful visit, and it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't reached out for that interview.
Was writing the book, did it help you? Okay.
Immensely. I talk about how I was stuck in my grief before. I didn't even know grief was a thing you could get stuck in until I
Mhm.
started doing research. And I felt the number of times where I was like, "Oh my God, there's a word for it. There's I never ended up doing any kind of group therapy or anything. And even the interviews that I did for the book turned out to be therapeutic for me. I felt like I wasn't alone.
Mhm.
And these common themes were coming up again and again between, the academic literature and these interviews I was doing. And the relationship I have with grief now versus before I started writing the book is like a 180. And I think it was very much the it was what I needed. And I've ended up including these exercises in the book that were basically things that I did for myself while writing the book that I found really helpful. And so, I included them there. And I think I hoped that the book would be healing for other people, but I think in a way I had kind of lost hope in myself feeling any better. I just felt like if I if Ben is still dead, then how could anything get any better? Right? The only thing
Mhm.
that makes this better is for him to come back, and that's not possible.
Right.
And I could not have foreseen how my relationship with grief would change, how my relationship with Ben would change. And it all came from the process of writing the book.
And what are some of your exercises that you want to share with our audience?
The big one that I have in the book is I have the encourage the reader to create something called the Mourner's User Manual, or the MUM, which is basically like sitting down when no one is asking you anything or asking you for anything and really just thinking through, like, what do you want and what is helpful for you? Like, is it helpful for you to go out to eat with friends, or is it helpful for you if they drop food off at your house? Is it, who are the people you can call, who, and all of these things that are pretty basic, but when you're in a bad place or you're put on the spot, if you're anything like me, your mind goes blank. You have no idea what to do. You're trying to make your parents happy. You're trying to, make all these other people happy. And it's just a way to, like, remember what you need, and that you are allowed to have needs, and to think through how can you ask for help and what are some things, that people can do because your friends really do want to help you. And ways to kind of explore your own needs really in grief. And I that's something that I wish I had done and thought about. um Another thing is creating a playlist. My
Mhm.
brother was really into music and especially into song lyrics. And so making, a playlist of his favorite songs, and, songs I can listen to that help me feel his presence and remind me of happy memories of him, not how he died, but how he lived. And I think things like that are really helpful.
Wow.
I love that. I love music. It definitely helps me in my loss too.
Hmm. Hmm.
So Annie, where do we get a hold of you? Where do we get a hold of the book? How do we connect with you?
Absolutely. Well, the book is available wherever books are sold. It's in print, and there's also an audiobook version that I narrate. And you can find me at on Instagram at Annie Sklaver Orenstein or annieorenstein.com.
All right, and remember the name of the book is Always a Sibling, The Forgotten Mourner's Guide to Grief. And thank you so much for being on our show today. I know you're going to give people a lot of hope.
Thank you for having me.
Annie, thank you so much. Thank you for building awareness for sibling loss and writing this book. And I know that Ben is your guiding light.
Thank you.
And Heidi and I want to thank you all for joining us on this show today. And we always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.